Hey everybody. Seems that once again the YouTuber who goes by the name of Bionic has taken issue with one of my videos. My most recent video was on the problem of evil, and let me replay a quick clip of that video so that you can get up to speed on my argument. You know, one of the top arguments against the reality of God is the problem of evil. Atheists like Sam Harris have often made this argument. The problem with this position, though, is that it actually causes atheists to contradict themselves. Let me explain. You can only judge a forgery if you have an absolute authentic standard to judge against. I have to have an outside authentic dollar standard in order to judge if any other piece of currency is closer to or farther from the real thing. Since this is the case, things like better and worse also require a standard outside of the people making the judgment. So if there's not an outside authentic standard for best, then better and worse do not exist. This is the same for good and evil. There has to be an absolute standard for good in order to be able to recognize something as evil in any degree. So, in an atheistic framework, there are literally no such things as better, worse, right, wrong, good, or evil. It's only possible for them to say that actions or circumstances are different from one another. Since this is the case, an atheist can only logically say that there is no problem of evil. And to say that a problem exists is to actually say that God exists. So when an atheist argues for the problem of evil, including when mentioning certain evil acts by supposedly religious people, they are in fact admitting that God exists as the standard to judge from, and so atheism self-destructs. So it seems that Bionic has a problem with this argument, and let's now listen to a few of her objections.
Right off the bat, I can't agree. An absolute best is not required to be able to say something is worse than something else. For example, I don't have to have had the absolute best pizza in the entire Western universe to be able to point to the brand I've enjoyed most and the brand I've enjoyed least. I don't need an absolute objective standard because better and worse are subjective judgments, personal opinions. Even if a standard were written down, perhaps the tolerance for error in the making of a product would have been subject to the opinions or even whims of the manufacturer who made that standard for the workers, and it's the same with morality.
Here's the problem with this. She is actually making my case when making this objection. First off, you can't have better and worse without best, because better and worse are degrees farther or closer to best. Like my illustration shows, if you don't have a dollar to judge from, then it's not possible to have things further from or closer to the dollar because the dollar doesn't exist. So if you don't have an outside standard for absolute best or absolute good, then it's not possible to have concepts which are closer to or farther from it because you are saying that best doesn't exist. There is no standard of judgment in this view, and that's the point. She sort of admits this when she says that these are subjective opinions, and I would agree. But this makes my case, because if they're subjective opinions, then one person's better is another person's worse, and one person's good is another person's evil. These things literally become subjective illusions, and so they don't exist. In her description, she even makes the claim that my argument is the worst she's ever heard. Well, as I've just shown, worst cannot exist without best. So what becomes of this statement? If you want to make this case really simple, think about it like this. Atheists would have to believe that the concept of an immaterial God is something invented by humans, and so it doesn't really exist. Well, if this is the case, that means that the concept of immaterial morality was also invented by humans, and so it also doesn't exist. To claim that an invented immaterial God doesn't exist because man invented him, while also claiming that invented immaterial morality does exist when man invented it, is absolute nonsense. If you're saying an invented immaterial God doesn't exist, then invented immaterial morality doesn't exist either. So, like I said, whether you go by my illustration of an absolute standard, or by this illustration I just gave you, it is not possible for morality to exist at all in an atheistic framework, and so good and evil do not exist. To say anything else is completely illogical, and it's also illogical to make a video calling God the evil one, when both God and evil don't exist in an atheistic framework. But let's continue into another contradiction about how evil God really is.
We'll find that atheists are not the ones contradicting themselves, and that your God breaks his own rules. For example, thou shalt not kill. I know that this is often reworded as thou shalt not murder, but even so, the Christian God commits global genocide with that flood of his, not to mention orbital strikes on a couple of cities just because he didn't like how people were getting it on with each other. Cold-blooded murder done in defiance of your own God's commandments.
So, if you've ever read the Bible at all, I hope you just caught the selective reading she is employing. First, you'll notice that the commandment is thou shalt not kill, or you shall not kill. God does not say that he shall not kill. So there isn't any contradiction at all. God gives life, and he is totally in the right to take life. To say he's wrong would be like saying that I can't draw a stick figure on paper and then immediately rip it in half. Is the art really going to tell the artist that he's wrong? But the truth is that God is much more than this simple reality. Both of those stories came about not because God wanted to just kill people for the fun of it. God was forced to judge people because of the extreme evil actions they were taking part in. In Genesis, it tells us that God judged the world because the earth was filled with violence, and all flesh had corrupted themselves on earth. And in terms of Sodom and Gomorrah, it was so bad there that there were literally gangs of roaming rapists in the streets. Are you saying it was wrong for God to judge these people, as God is the judge of the world? I guess it's also wrong for the judges in our courts of law to judge murderers and rapists then. But let's go on.
And then there is thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, there's some dispute about whether Mary and Joseph were hitched at the time, but your God totally got it on with another guy's girlfriend, getting her pregnant. So at the very least, he cheated with her, married or not. Whether you can define that as coveting or dishonesty, no matter how you look at it, he had to have violated a church doctrine or three.
This objection is just absolutely ridiculous. God provided genetic information, as he is the Word, and combined it with Mary's DNA in order to provide himself a vehicle which would be both human and divine. This is simple genetics, and I guess by your viewpoint, doctors who perform in vitro fertilization are also getting it on with their patients. God broke no commandment because it's always God in every situation that takes the male and female DNA and weaves and codes a new strand of DNA for every baby. God is the one who forms every baby in the womb. So no, God isn't breaking any rules at all when it comes to the virgin birth. But let's go on.
While we're on the subject of thou shalt not kill, remember when he told Abraham to sacrifice his own son? And then it turns out that God was lying to him and stops him at the last second. Surely this religion frowns on lying.
No, God was not lying. God told Abraham to go, and God told Abraham to stop. These aren't lies, they're commandments. What's even more interesting is that this whole situation was set up for a purpose and a prophecy that would later be fulfilled in the New Testament. God told Abraham to stop, and that the name of that mountain from then on would be known as the Lord will provide. And the Lord did provide, because many years later the Son of God was sacrificed in that very same area. And the Lord provided humanity with a payment for sins, forgiveness, and the option for eternal life with Jesus. So God's not the monster you're making him out to be, because he did this for you. He didn't require Isaac's blood. Instead, he paid with his own blood. But let's go on.
I've often said that the biggest mistake Christians ever made was making their God too powerful. Make him even 99.99999% benevolent instead of omnibenevolent, and the problem of evil goes away. Make God 99.9% powerful instead of omnipotent, and the problem of evil goes away. Make God 99.9% aware of what's going on instead of omniscient, and the problem of evil goes away. But make God all-knowing, powerful, and caring means that he'd know and care about bad things happening and has the power to stop them. That this guarantee is obviously not present in reality, then this triple omni-God clearly doesn't exist. So where does that leave us? Either your God's nature isn't as you think, or he doesn't exist at all. I know which seems most likely given the evidence, but I suspect Truth Speaks won't agree.
This is the one thing that she's right about, because indeed I do not agree with what she just said. No Christian claims to have invented God. That is an opinion based on no evidence at all. All the evidence we have points to a transcendent being existing, though. Whether it's thoughts, DNA code, morality, or even mathematics, there are many examples of immaterial things existing in our reality. The reason they are immaterial is because they do not take up space in the universe, which means they're not material things and so are not a part of the material universe. They are a part of the transcendent realm of God, If you think something like mathematics is material or invented by man, let's listen to a quick clip of Sir Roger Penrose of Oxford, one of the world's leading mathematicians.
So if you like mathematical facts, like there is no largest prime number, it's something independent of ourselves. It's always been true. It didn't somehow become true as soon as somebody saw how to prove it. It's always been true.
And it would have been true if nobody
If
ever
nobody had been
proved
around,
it.
exactly, yes. In a sense, that had to be so, because if the physical world depended so precisely on these mathematical laws, I couldn't have known what to do in a certain sense if the mathematics hadn't already been there. I mean, it's not us that imposes this on the world. It's out there.
You see, mathematical laws require a lawgiver, and so mathematics itself is evidence for God, along with DNA code, thoughts, dreams, rationality, and morality. And when it comes to God being all-powerful, this simply goes with logic. God can't be 99.9% anything because we are talking about the eternal starting point of all things. And it's completely illogical to say that the eternal starting point isn't 100% powerful. And, in terms of morality, 100% good. That's why I said that God is the standard of absolute good. It's not a standard that God created. God himself is the standard. In terms of God allowing bad things to happen, I guess Bionic Dance couldn't even finish my original 2-minute video, because I explained this. Real quick, when it comes to Christianity, the problem is real simple to answer, at least when you're not currently in trouble. God has given us free will in order to choose between good and evil, in order to be able to ultimately choose Jesus, who is God and who is the standard of goodness. Sadly, many use this free will to cause harm to others, to harm themselves, or to simply make the wrong choices. But God has provided a solution for this problem. If God allows evil to happen to something he has drawn, this is what Jesus can do. He can put them right back together and give them eternal life. Most of the evil in the world results because God allows free will. People are free to hurt or help other people, and that's the reality. So is Bionic Dance saying that she doesn't want to be free to choose her own path? A little while ago she objected to God judging the world and Sodom and Gomorrah because they slipped into total corruption. But now she wants God to stop every bad thing that happens. You can't have it both ways. You can't get angry at God for telling people what to do and stopping them at times, and then turn around and get angry at God for not stopping them by force all the time. We have free will, and this is a gift from God that people, unfortunately, often don't use wisely, and that's why we see so much evil. To wrap up, like I said, the problem of evil doesn't exist in an atheistic framework. In that framework, morality would be as unreal as a created God. Neither one can exist. So any mention of morality is actually admitting that God exists as the standard of goodness. We have feelings about morality because we are made in God's image. Bionic Dance is also made in God's image, and so I will pray for her, and I suggest that others pray for her as well. I invite her to take a leap of faith and reach out to Jesus, because that's what I did, and that's why I'm no longer an atheist myself. Jesus will give you the proof you need if you sincerely desire a relationship with him. Remember, the way of the truth means life, so we need to listen when the truth speaks.